I became interested in learning to fly when I was a little kid, probably like a lot of you. I wanted to be an astronaut. How many of you remember seeing Neil Armstrong walk on the moon? Remember that? I was sitting in front of a black and white TV. I was 11 years old in Concord, California, and I said, I want to be one of those people one day. And back then, in 1969, how many of you thought for sure we would be living on Mars by the year 2000, right? We all did. So I wanted to be an astronaut to go to Mars. And I did get an opportunity to get into the Air Force. I worked my way through college as a flight instructor, billed my hours that way. It was a really fun time flight instructing, flying for a funeral home, and you know what we carry if you work for a funeral home, and doing some flying college football coaches around on Friday afternoons for an SEC team. So did a lot of stuff like that to build my hours. When I got to the Air Force to get my commission through the officer training school, when you go into the military, how many of you have been to like basic training or whatever, and they give you all those shots? Remember that? They tell you might get sick. Well, I got sick, unfortunately, the next day and actually passed out. That's not a good thing to happen when you show up and you're supposed to be a pilot, to pass out. So they eventually, I did my 6 weeks in the U.S. Air Force, and then they gave me a general discharge over a medical technicality. And then I eventually went on and did a lot of work in Silicon Valley, where I was born and raised in California, mostly working not in aviation, but in high-tech marketing. Then I got involved in higher education. And then another university about 4 or 5 years ago decided to start an aviation program, and I was the one person they found that had any experience doing that. I did have enough experience years ago to start a Part 141 school. We just had the private pilot certificate, so I had some experience doing that a little bit. And so the other university said, well, we need somebody who can help start this program. So I started the program, mostly from the academic standpoint. I finally did get my medical and got my flight review, but I don't really fly that much. I do have a ground instructor, advanced and instrument certificate, so I can kind of help from the education standpoint. But my role at Indiana Wesleyan is to provide the academic means by which we can offer a degree program. And then we partner with flight schools like here in Air Marion to actually deliver the flight training. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about how the program works. And as you probably know, there's a pent-up demand for pilots out there, especially when COVID-19 hit. They did a lot of furloughs, and what happened is they wiped out a whole lot of senior pilots that were flying the wide-body heavy aircraft. In fact, American Airlines now, they have a whole bunch of Airbus 330 sitting around. I think they're just getting rid of them because they don't have any more pilots that can fly those, and the cost of training them is way too much. I think they're upgrading to 787 platform or something like that. But the airlines, because there was already a pent-up demand because the economy growing, phased out retirement, the global economy growing, like China and India, as more and more people move into the middle class, they like to travel. So that puts a worldwide demand on the labor market for pilots. So those countries, or anybody who can qualify, you know, they're not just, they're recruiting pilots from all over, including the United States. And then there's a shortage in the military. And then when you lay on top of that the downsize after COVID and now the rehire, right now it is really, the airlines are jammed up. They don't have enough pilots. So it's a really good time now for people to consider entering into this as a career. So what we see as a university, do we want to go out and buy half a dozen aircraft and hire pilots, well, that just really doesn't work for us because there's plenty of flight schools out there. So we have this partnership program where we partner with local flight schools to be able to do the flight training. Then we wrap around the degree, and what that does is it actually enables students to access ways of financing their flight training that they wouldn't otherwise unless they were in a degree program. So our model is we provide the aviation degree, we contract out with the local flight school under Part 141 to do the ground and flight training, and then we add that the funding mechanisms that a university offers to be able to pay for your flight training. So this is what the value is that we're providing to the industry and to the community. University partnering with the flight school enables us to provide more pathways for people to get jobs and to satisfy the need for more pilots out there. So again, what this does is it helps to grow the industry because we have a way to finance. So I'm going to talk about the actual degree program right now, but how much do you think it costs today to go from 0 to what we might say hero? 0 hours all the way to become a flight instructor. What's it run? A lot more than probably, it was $1,200 for me to get my private in 1977. Now you have to add at least a 0 to that, right? So to go from private 0 hours to pay for flight school, typical Part 61. Andy, what would you tell a person walking in the door what their investment would be?
Going to the private, you're going to have $9,500.
Okay.
Instrument's going to be basically the same thing. Commercial, you're going to have a couple thousand, instructor a couple thousand.
Yeah, so 20, 40, something $45,000 from start to finish. And that's a very affordable place. A lot of Part 141 flight schools will quote you somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000 to $14,000 to $15,000. By the way, when we did the summer aviation program with the Air Force JROTC, those cadets were selected competitively throughout the country. They sent us 17, and out of 23 other universities, our cadets finished in the fewest amount of total hours on average, and all of them got their private certificate. That was better than the average of Purdue, University of North Dakota, Embry-Riddle. In fact, the University of North Dakota didn't even finish any of their students to get the private, and they're like one of the top 5 universities out there. One of the reasons for that is because we partner with local flight schools that are looking to do it efficiently. So Andy and his team, as well as the folks that came up from Jeff Air down in Greenwood, just did an excellent job of working with the students. So really good job. So we have 2 degrees. One is an associate and the other is a bachelor's. Associate degree is actually kind of like a stepping stone. Airlines now, most airlines no longer require a 4-year degree, except I think UPS, FedEx, might be a few, Delta, likes to see a 4-year degree. That always makes you much more competitive, but because there's such a backed up demand for pilots, they're taking folks at least at the regionals that don't even have a degree yet to get started. So the associate degree is a step in the door. What we do is we start with all the students. Their first term, they start with their private. Term is 12 weeks long. Then they do their instrument. That's another 12 weeks. Commercial is 2 12-week terms. That's 24 weeks. And then they do the CFI. So within about a year, they're able to start working as a flight instructor, and then they can take the rest of their courses online, like their English, their math, other general ed courses, where often a degree is in aviation, you would think the flight courses are your major courses and you take those later in your academic career. You actually start with your courses in your major early. The reason for that is so that you can start working as a flight instructor on your own schedule. It gives you a lot of flexibility. Then you can finish your degree online so that when you graduate, you have enough hours and experience to really have your choice of where you want to go. So the associate degree takes 2 years, and it's basic general ed, 30 hours of general ed like math, English, history, things like that, with about 27 of those hours are aviation related flight courses. There's an introduction to the aviation industry course that we have all students to take so that they have an understanding of the overall industry. The science class that they have is weather. So rather than taking biology or physics or something, you could take those, but the weather course counts as your science course. And so I think Mark can attest to that. You learn a lot more than just what you have to do to pass the written. Is that right, Mark?
That was a lot deeper.
Mark did a good job in that class too. So the career, what we say, this is the fastest way to get into a career in aviation is to start your associate. Now, once you get your associate degree, we encourage students to go on and do their bachelor's. Now, they can start with their bachelor's degree and enroll their very first term, or they can stair-step it, get an associate, then get a bachelor's. And so the bachelor's degree is another 2 years, and what we add on to that are industry-specific and management/business courses. So you take courses in like accounting, management, economics, marketing, so that you have a good understanding of business. It's not a full business degree, but it's the essentials of business. It's like the core of business. And then aviation management courses that go beyond what you would normally get in your normal ground school. So you take a course, a safety management course. You take a course in human factors slash CRM, crew resource management. So you learn multi-pilot operations that way. You take a course in aerodynamics and systems. So it goes beyond just what you have to get through your normal ground school. You learn more about systems. You take an operations course, which really is kind of through the eyes of air traffic control and global operations. So what's it take to file a flight plan and go to Europe and back? You know, how is that different than just flying VFR between here and Indianapolis, right? So you learn more systems-wide. We have a course called Regional Airline Transition. So when you go off to the regional airlines, you go into their initial in-dock program and then their initial training program, where first you learn about the airline and its HR things, and then you get a crash course on essentially, it's like ATP ground school to get your ATP certificate, but it's a little bit more than that. It's learning the entire systems of the aircraft, how to operate. There's simulator time, and so by the time you're finished with that, and there's a pretty good washout rate on that, you're ready to go out onto the flight line. What the regional airlines have discovered is it's very costly to run a new hire through that because they're paying them, plus they're training them. And when they have about a 25% washout rate, they have to find a way to be a little bit more selective. So what a lot of universities are doing is they're offering what they call a regional airline transition course. So that is we just wrote that course. We have somebody from the training division of Republic Airways and somebody else who ran the training at one of the other regionals, I forgot which one. And they basically took all of their manuals, their training manuals, and said, we're just going to run you through that course that you would outside of actually physically being in the simulator. So what that means is you go through that course and you've already been exposed to all the content, so that when you go out on your first month of work in training, it doesn't hit you like a fire hose. So students who go through the regional airline transition course are much better prepared to make it through that initial training when they get to the airlines, because it's not all brand new. So we actually take the, I think they use Embraer 145 or 170 manuals to go through. I think a combination of both of those. So they learn all the flows, all the systems, how to flight plan, weight and balance, everything that you would normally need to do at that level of knowledge to be able to go on to that. So you take a regional airline. Now, if a student says, you know what, I really don't want to go to the airlines, I would prefer just to fly, you know, I just want to be a flight instructor, or maybe they get through the program and say, I want to just fly Part 91 corporate flying. You could, in lieu of doing that course, you could take an internship. Right, so that the students have their option. The internship would be, you know, working somewhere in the field, maybe as a flight instructor, maybe working at an airport, maybe working in, you know, operations at an airline or something like that. So students have the opportunity to be able to pick that up. So for parents who are trying to help their sons and daughters figure out what's a good path, we always like to say, have something to fall back on. If you lose your medical or something like that, that's why the aviation management is such a solid four-year degree, because you have business courses and then you have these other aviation-related courses. So finding another job in the aviation industry becomes a lot easier, or you could transfer into something else if you wanted. So 2 degrees associate, which is kind of the fast track to become a professional pilot, and then the bachelor's degree to follow up on top of that to get, you know, more well-rounded. Now, a lot of people are asking the question, well, why do I need to get a degree if the airlines don't require it? Well, that's a short-sighted way of viewing the situation, because right now the labor market is such that they just need people to fill a seat. But it will become more competitive, and it'll be normal again at some point where having the degree is going to be more valuable. And the benefit of having a degree like this is you're getting a lot more knowledge and information to make you a better professional in the industry, right? So just think about that. If you were a passenger on a Southwest flight or a Republic Airways flight or American, would you want the pilots to have a degree or not have a degree? You probably would want them to have a degree. So let's say a person already, and we've had calls on this, people already have their pilot certificates, they're maybe already working in the industry, and now they realize, hey, I need to get a degree so that, you know, I can move on up. What you can do is transfer all of your FAA certificates into academic credit and then just take the remaining courses that you need to fill out your degree. So you can transfer your FAA certificate for actual academic credit. And that can add into the degree. Any questions about the degree and how it's kind of formed? Just so you know, this program is designed for in a partnership model where people are training at a local airport, and so it's not necessarily a program where you go to a main college, live in the dorm, take a 16-week-long face-to-face course. It's designed for students who might be working or living at home or living close to an airport, and their academic courses are all online. The flight training is done with a local partner. Okay? Let me just tell you about a little bit more of how we communicate to the students. We're just not looking for any student, we're looking for the ideal student, the student who will be successful in this program. So every student who applies, I interview, and we have an interview process because we want to know what is the student's motivation. Have they ever been in a general aviation aircraft before? What do they know what it's like? Because really, an airline pilot is really a systems manager rule follower, right? That's very different than somebody who's an ag pilot, right? Any ag pilots, by the way? Okay. I always thought that would be fun. Just like you could get your stick and rudder time out there and pull all those G's and everything. So we look at trying to understand the temperament and the goals of the student to give them the best advice as to what they might want to do and how they understand what the career's like. Some people get to the airlines and they realize this is not what I thought it was going to be. And they work out on the line six months and they come and find another job. They either do Part 91 corporate flying, they might just love flight instructing. Flight instructing is a very noble, fun type of job to be in. So not all of our students will necessarily go to the airline. So we also think that the ideal candidate already has the private, or that they at least have done a discovery flight. The reason why we say private is because we know that they already understand the training environment. They've already proven that they can be a pilot. So a lot of people want to be pilots, and once they start spending money doing it, they realize that they don't. So it's not, we don't require you to have a private pilot certificate, but that tends to be a more ideal student for us. We know that they're going to be more successful. The track record of 18-year-old students going away to college, trying to do their private pilot in their freshman year of college, it is a collision of life and hormones all going on at the same time that they tend to lose focus in their private pilot because they want the full college experience. So what a lot of universities do is they'll spread the private pilot out over a whole year, not just a term, or maybe they'll wait until they're sophomores before they even start flying. Because students want to, they're adults, they're moving away from home, they're taking their own classes, there's so much new things that they're being exposed to, and they're trying to figure out what they really want to do in life. To have the discipline at 18 when you're in college, living on the main campus, to go to the airport 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and study. And it doesn't always work. It's not to say that those are students who will never become pilots, but it's a little bit different. So that's why when we're looking at applications, if somebody already has a private, that's even better because we know that they can fly. And if they already have their private certificate, we give them 6 credit hours and then they start right on their instrument rating. Okay? We just give them the credit for the private and move on from there. Again, a discovery flight is really important. Because then they're actually sitting in the left seat of the aircraft, they're manipulating the controls, they feel what it's like to be, kind of cramped in there, and then it really inspires them. Right, Andy, wouldn't you say that it's a way to really hook them?
Yeah.
Hook them, yeah.
No one wants to do the studying, but if you put them in at the controls of the plane, that's...
Yes. Yeah, you got to hook them, right? Sometimes they spit out the hook, and that's probably good, but normally it just hooks them and it just ties them back into their motivation. We're asking the students to commit to 3 to 5 times a week to be at the airport. We say 3 to 4 hour blocks of time per week, so that if they get at least 3 flights in a week, 3 lessons in a week, they should finish in 12 weeks with a little bit of room to spare. Weather delays, that's always a challenge. Maintenance might be an issue. As you know, when you start doing your cross country, that takes a little bit more planning. But that's kind of the normal pace, 3 to 4 times a week. So when we talk to potential prospects who say, I have a full-time job, 8 to 5, and I have 2 children, and I want to become a pilot. Okay. We start asking about the support system. What's it going to be like to rearrange your life to be able to make that commitment? Because it's not something that you can only do on a weekend in our program. If that's the time that you can devote is like 1 weekend a week, then we would say just go to Andy and work it out with him, do it part 90, part 61, and earn your way that way. But if you want to be in a university program, it's a little bit more rigorous because you have to get it done during a term. Of course, if there are issues that require an incomplete, usually that would be something like, extended period of weather problems, then you can take an incomplete and finish, but then you have to kind of get caught up. So it's a key thing to make sure that you have the support and the dedication and focus, because as you know, and a cockpit is a very expensive classroom. So the more you can show up prepared, the student shows up prepared, they've thought through the lesson, they know what's going on ahead of time. They can even, use a simulator or do chair flying, get the muscle memory of a maneuver and rehearse it, visualize it, go over and over in the head. That's the way you can compress your time training. If you show up and expect the instructor to teach you everything, well, it'll cost you time and money, right? So motivated students do all their preparation and they're focused, and this is their primary goal. That's why it's a challenge for 18-year-olds who go off to college to get through this program. I mean, they'll get over that hump and they'll eventually figure it out. Let me just show you our locations. Right now, we have a partnership, Sweet Aviation up in Fort Wayne. Then Jeff Air, we have 4 locations. Up here in Marion, we partner with Andy and Air Marion using the Jeff Air Agency Certificate for Part 141. Part 141 is a more structured training environment that's approved by the FAA. For a student to use any federal financial aid or federal loans, that money can only go to programs that are Part 141. That's just the way the regulations work. So the beauty of that partnership is then Andy is the assistant chief pilot when we have an IWU student here, and they just have a business relationship with Jeff Air using their folks and their aircraft right here in Marion. Jeff Air's main location is down in Greenwood, and then they just made arrangements down in Bowman Field and over in Evansville to be able to offer flight training. Those locations will come online in the spring. And then we have another partner in the Cincinnati area out of Lufkin, Flamingo Air. They have been waiting to get their Part 141 certificate for flight training, and they should be coming online also in the spring. So those are the locations that we currently have for IWU flight training. We have been in discussions with other potential partners. For right now, this is what we're going with. There may be another partner that we might bring on in the coming months, but not so sure with that. Once we really operationalize this piece, then we will look at partnering outside of the Midwest. So all of the ground school, all of the actual flight training, again, like I said, we contract out. Many other universities have a program like that where it's contracted out, and then they learn local with a flight instructor. Now, what they do, their accountability to us is each week, once they're in a flight training program, they check in with us on a weekly basis so we can track their progress. Because if you're using financial aid or loans, you have to show adequate progress in order to keep getting your financial aid. So they check in, and then my job is to work with the partners to make sure that if we have challenges with a student along the way, we can deal with it that way. So let me just talk a little bit about the funding piece of it. This is a very career empowering degree. You do your job, you're a decent human being, you've got some basic communication strengths. In fact, by the way, if you talk to hiring folks at regional airlines and you ask them, what kind of person are you looking for? The pilots on the crew, people who are, you know, in the interview process, their quickest response is, we just want somebody we like. You know, somebody that's got a decent sense of humor, they're not crazy, and somebody that we like that we can go on a three-day trip with. Like, should they know how to fly? Well, of course, you know, but they want a likable person, right? So it's just, it's being a decent human being, right? And that's what IWU, we you know, put that emphasis on character. You know, we're a faith-based school. We integrate faith into all of our academic courses, encouraging people to, you know, be ethical in all their ways of you know, dealing in the professional world. People don't have to share our faith to be a student. All of our faculty members do. And we expose people to our faith in the course, but that's between the student and God as to how they think through that. So that really helps. That really helps. So all the flight training is done under Part 41. Now let me explain the financial aid piece of it. Financial aid, for some people, when they hear that word, they think it means free money, somebody else pays for it. That's why we have like a almost $2 trillion student financial aid debt, because even though kids take out loans, they think somebody else is going to pay for it. In fact, they think they graduate with like $100,000 debt. Well, I'm not going to pay this. You know, why should I pay this? You know, I had to work hard to go to school. Well, those of you who went to college, did you pay your own way? Yeah, now we're paying, through our taxes, we're paying for people who don't want to pay off their student loans. So financial aid does not mean free. Now there are layers of financial aid. When you go to college, you fill out something called, have you done this yet? The FAFSA form? Right. So the FAFSA form is a centralized place where you can learn to see what you might be qualified for in terms of, there is some free money. There can be some grant money. Some states have stacked on top of that some free money. Okay, but usually what that does is that's enough to maybe pay for the tuition, but it's not enough to pay for the flight fees. So on top of that, you can do a federal loan, like a Stafford loan, which is federally backed loans, and you don't have to start paying those back until you finish your degree. You could do something called Parent Plus loans, but the parents have to qualify. They have to have the right credit qualifications to do that, but then the parents is basically, it's like a cosign, right? So you have Parent Plus loans, and then you have private loans on top of that. So the way you get a private loan, there's like a clearinghouse, and it's connected kind of to the FAFSA. So you put in the information you want there, and then other lending institutions bid on giving you money or selling you money. Kind of like if you were to go out and get a loan on a vehicle or an aircraft or a house, it's like a place where lenders can say, well, I'll give you $50,000 for 5% interest or whatever. Somebody else might say, I'll give you $40,000 for 3%, but with a loan origination fee. So the student has to figure out what's in their best interest when they put that together. So you take grant money, federal loans, private loans, or sometimes you have to reach into your own back pocket, put the money in yourself. You can use some of those loans, or not loans, what are they called? They're not loans. They're kind of like retirement, but what are they called? 507s, I think, where you can start, for your kids, you can start putting money away into 529s. There, thank you. So then that money can be ready for people to learn how to fly. So you stack all that up. What we do is we collect those fees. Then we contract with the flight school. We pay them. They provide the flight training that way. And we set it up where we give the student enough for the average student to finish their private. I think it's 43, 44, 45 hours, something like that. Even though Part 141 only requires 35 hours, most people can't do it in that amount of time to really be safe. So I think we budget something like 45 hours. If a student needs more hours, then it's up to them to pay that extra themselves. If they finish in fewer hours and have a credit, it just applies back to their account. Then instrument and commercial tend to be whatever the minimum FAA requirements are, because that usually, commercial, as you know, is just time building. So that's how the financing works, depending on where a student goes, what type of aircraft the flight school is using, and what the local rates are. It can vary. To get your degree, you're required to have your private, commercial, and instrument, single engine. We originally said you had to get your CFI. We changed that and made that a recommended elective. Okay, you can do a multi-engine add-on. You can do CFII, you can do multi-engine instructor, and then we hope once Jeff Air gets approved, and I don't know if you know this or not, but they've applied to do the helicopter to airplane add-on. They've applied for 141 on that. So you have a lot of military pilots coming out that need their fixed wing, and so we'll add that to our curriculum as well. So people come out of the military, especially Army pilots who are helicopter, they need to transition to airplanes. And so we'll have that as a course in the program down the road. So that's pretty much the how that program works. And love to hear what your questions are.
Joe, question.
Yes.
Are you working on any articulation agreements between secondary schools and post-secondary, especially IWU?
Yeah.
We're trying to encourage students to participate in the high school aviation program that we have on the field. Is there an advantage to the student going into your program, having had an experience in this program? The other thing is, I would love to see, and this is just me, but I would love to see students from the high school program that we have coming out with their private pilot license. And in that case, you got the high school paying for some of their flight time, There's also a foundation that will pay for
Yeah.
flight time. But where are you?
So we started some conversations along that line. We need to re-engage and pick those up. After the next academic year, you may have heard, was publicly announced that President Wright's retiring. I think it was just publicly announced yesterday. And I think with his transition, by the way, it was great having a president who's a pilot, right? That makes things work a lot easier within the university. And then some other readjustments, consolidations, and some program consolidations and some downsizing because of programs that we're kind of phasing out. We've put a lot of energy into sort of that restructuring piece of it. So we'll pick back up the first of the year to re-engage in those conversations with things like dual enrollment. There's a couple of Young Eagles program down in the Indy area they're also very much interested in that. Because I have good connections with the Aerospace Center for Excellence down in Lakeland that's connected to Sun and Fun. They're the creator of a lot of high school curriculum. You know, they've used some of the AOP, but they've also developed their own. They have some models to be able to work with high schools. So what I'm looking forward to is re-engaging in those conversations. So ideally, we could offer dual enrollment, like with the private pilot ground school dual enrollment. One of the key pieces to make that work is going from like just to solo or just some flight hours all the way to the private, and the funding of that Part 141 versus Part 61. Because if it's a university program where you're using any kind of federal dollars, it has to be Part 141. So they would, let's say they already soloed, well, they could transfer some of those up to 50%, no, it's up to 25% of those hours towards Part 141. We'd have to enroll them in Part 141. They can graduate under Part 61. I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but we have to talk a little bit about how to make that piece of it work so that the student isn't spending more money or somebody paying more money than they need to get them to the private. Ideally, the best way to do that would be some sort of a flow from this course right into this course. You graduate, you have all of these things. Maybe they finish up with their private in the summer and they start right in the fall on instrument.
Well, I think there needs to be a smooth transition, as well as a dual credit program, but a smooth transition between a secondary program and the post-secondary program.
We'll spin those meetings up again. You can help us on that.
I spent a good portion of my professional career working on articulation agreements with post-secondary schools.
We definitely will spin those up. The other piece that's a little complicated is Indiana Wesleyan has two academic divisions. They have the main campus and they have what we call National Global, which the aviation is housed in National Global. So if a student went to our main campus and wanted to major in aviation, they would have to actually enroll in the National Global. So it's a little clunky. We need to work out those bugs for a student who would want to, live on campus or go to the, main campus.
Thank you.
Other questions?
One of my questions. So an on-campus student can do that?
It's a little clunky, but we can work it out with them. Yeah, clunky in the terms of who's their advisor, how does it all get paid for, because the tuition model is different if you're on main campus, and it's actually cheaper if they're National Global and live at home. That would be the easiest way, but a lot of students like to live on campus, and I would encourage that. I really, actually, as much as I believe in all different ways of doing education, and we homeschooled our children. We have 5 children most of the way, and 3 of them went to college, 2 of them went into the military. I really do believe there is value in a young person going off to college for at least a year for the formation of that. Now, I wouldn't just send them to any university. They'll come out probably not voting like you. But I don't mean to get political, but you know what I mean. But I think students need to be exposed to a variety of ideas and ideology. They have to develop their own theology, their own politics, their own all of that. You have to be very discerning of where you spend your money when you send your son and daughter off to school. That's why schools like IWU are what I would say, it's a much healthier type of environment to send your 18-year-old off to these days than other places. I went to secular schools. One of my daughters went to a secular school, the other two went to Christian schools. Then my other two boys went right into the Marines. It's not exactly like going to a Christian school when you're 18 years old. Any Marines, by the way, here? They're great guys. I love them dearly. My dear wife, she learned to tolerate the language, the Marine language. So she did not tolerate it for a while, but then she said, okay, I'll just plug my ears. So there is value in that, although I would also say going in debt for 4 years at a college when your goal is to just get a job, it isn't really that great of a return on investment. And I probably shouldn't be saying that as being a higher ed educator here. But a degree like this is much more empowering because you're starting off really well. In fact, I think if you look in the ads, I think the starting regional 1,500-hour pilot's making $60,000, $70,000 a year. I mean, that's your first job out of college, $60,000, $70,000 is pretty darn good. So in that respect, it's very career empowering. It's a degree where you're going to get your money back quicker than if you were to study, I don't know, pick something where you only maybe, I don't know. Education majors. Yeah, we don't pay our teachers enough. It's unfortunate. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you want to get rich?
I know. My wife, she's retired now, but she was a school teacher for a while, and then we had kids, and she went back and became a substitute teacher. She says, man, you go into the high schools, they throw chairs at you if you're a substitute teacher, and it's just totally different. And so I'm not doing that. But bless her hearts. One of my sisters is a first grade teacher, and she was telling us they brought Christmas cupcakes, and some kid went over to the shelf, threw them on the ground, and stomped on every single one of them. And all the kids were crying. She brought some of her own, and she said, that's okay, class, I have some too. She went and got her Tupperware thing and brought them out, and that same kid grabbed that Tupperware, threw them on the ground, stomped on all of those. Just traumatized the whole class. That just happened like a couple of days ago. First grade in North Carolina. So, yes, bless the hearts of school teachers. All right, other questions? How can I help you out here? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Love to chat with you a little bit more about. Is everyone here a pilot? Pretty much everyone's here a pilot. Yeah. There's something about being a pilot that is so cool. Just to become a private pilot, then if you do it professionally, it takes a lot. So anybody who's become a pilot is very accomplished. So congratulate you for that. Those of you who fly professionally, it's so much better today. The safety systems, the avionics, as you know, way better than they were 30, 40, 50 years ago. So it's a very safe profession to be in. You just have to be smart about it. Some days like this, you probably wouldn't want to fly unless you were very proficient. But thank you all very much for the opportunity to come. This summer, we hope to also have some Air Force JROTC cadets again. We'd love to have the whole community, like you did last year, really embrace that. We'll have more announcements once we understand exactly who and how many that we have coming this summer again.